this just does one school some technology. It's nowhere enough. The hope that we really have is that if we can get on the state building list and have our 2 elementary schools renovated and expanded, then we will get new technology like we got here at the middle school when this project was done. $3,000 accounts, student services, attendance, athletics, other student activities, very small increase. Maintenance, custodial, heating, utilities, grounds. There is something that has been useful to us is having an energy manager, somebody to remind people about shutting off all of the computers before long weekends, shutting off the heat, keeping these lights that keep going off was one of his ideas. But, you know, to save energy where we can, cost avoidance, and system software solutions previously paid for from grants in $4,400, which is $36,000. Retirement, student insurance basically have been the same over time. And leases, these are all the copying machines, the Rizzo machines. Those are the leases that pay for those. And the good news is when we get a new lease, for the first couple of years, we don't have to pay maintenance on them. And so we do keep moving them. And they get an awful lot of people. Machines are not made to be used by the number of people who use them in the schools. Tuition. Bristol Agricultural, we have approximately 12 children who go to Bristol Agricultural School. That's because they want a program that is not offered at Upper Cape or Wareham High School. Tuition is approximately $18,000 a year. That comes right out of our net school spending budget. That we budgeted $162,423 for next year. This is the largest increase right here, and this is because even though the state may say, you're not going to get an increase, we're having hard times, we can't give you any more money, but when private day schools, the special education come before the state and ask for an increase, the average increase over the last 3 years has been 7%. That's why that number has to go up. On non-net school spending. The last 2 years, we've been at these numbers, so this is the non-net. It's these two accounts together. And so, $1,467,915. This year we're requesting $1,490,268, or a $22,000 increase, or 1.5. If we look at the next slide, you will see that the average increase over 6 years in the transportation on non-net school spending has been 0. You take the -3% in 07 and you move it across, a -2, do the math, 0. The budget that I am here before presenting to all of the boards. Net school spending, $27,091,413. Non-net school spending, $1,490,268,000. Combined, $28,581,681. Or a 7.8% increase over last year. The comparison between 11 and 12 is made much more difficult because of the grant money that has been lost. because of the additional edu-jobs money that created new positions and the loss of the federal stimulus money. Again, I want to remind you, to decrease the achievement gap, we need to decrease the spending gap. Minimum net spending is not adequate spending. The formula that derives minimum net spending hasn't changed since 1993. Look at your household budgets. Health care and health insurance is one of the things that go into making up minimum net spending. That has not increased since '93. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Rabinovich. We'll save our questions till the end. Mr. Andrews, if you'd like to make your presentation at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark, just give me a minute, I'll get it up there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have three sets of partners here tonight, the way I look at it. The school committee has worked very hard on this presentation and the recommendations that Dr. Rabinovich has made. We've got the Board of Selectmen who understand the fiscal condition that we're in, and we've got the Finance Committee. The only entity that is not here tonight to help us solve some of these problems that we're facing in terms of fiscal constraint is the governor. A week from tonight, the governor will submit his budget. He will either then tell us at that point in time, or the legislature, the House and Senate, what they intend to do with the largest pool of dollars that comes into the school district, Chapter 70. It's the law. And the law says that the school department gets these dollars. It used to be about $13.5, $14 million. It's down to $12.1 million. We need to work as a team to solve these fiscal issues. And if I could just, what we have facing us, and we did this on purpose because I think not only is Chapter 70 going to be on the table for chopping block, if you will, that the unrestricted local aid to the town will be cut. We cannot operate at a deficit. If you spend more than you make during the fiscal year, you're going to wind up in a situation where the state's going to take the money back at recap time, which we just finished. We just set the tax rate for the first time in several years. On time, tax bills are out. And guess what? Every person in this room that pays their taxes is paying the absolute levy limit amount, 2.5%. With new growth, that comes out to be about $1 million. So we're not pulling any punches here. We're bringing our revenue down locally to say that we have leveled that off. We have building permits and health permits that have increased because of, I think, a very aggressive approach in those departments. But we've brought our revenue down by 2% for fiscal 2011. Our expenditures have gone up by 3%. Why is that? We haven't settled our collective bargaining agreements. We had outstanding contracts for 11 units when I arrived about a year ago. They have not been settled. That's a liability. We're going to have to pay it at some point in time. We've solved, as you'll see in a couple of minutes, solved that problem. That 3% adjustment in the lines means that every town department has been level funded at no increase going forward. We're also looking at funding pension and something called post-employment benefits going forward that we are responsible for as a town. We settled 5 out of 11 contracts, which have been overdue, just to get caught up. This isn't like, I talked with the superintendent earlier tonight, it's a bargaining year this year, Mr. Superintendent, for next year.
That is correct.
Okay, we're not even caught up to that point. Next screen, this. So the challenge to our leadership team is to try to look at what they're doing, try to look at it and to work strategically. We had the Department of Revenue in and they said that we had 42 findings which touched every single department in town. No one department
did any better than any other department. We've got to get this fiscal stability worked out. We're at 91% completed at the beginning part of December. I intend to solve that hopefully between now and the first week in February. We've looked at putting resources in where they told us we needed resources, in the accounting department, in the planning department, and in the town administrator's office, part-time position to basically get us up to speed as we work with all the departments to solve the 42 findings by Mass Department of Revenue. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a couple of municipal laborers? You're out there, I'm still getting calls about ice and snow, buildup in neighborhoods and in front of various houses. We need to build up that department or find some way to get the streets safe. And that's the first time in about a decade. We've maintained our lifeguard program, which has brought people back to our beaches for the first time in a long time. Our independent auditors continue to assist us in gaining fiscal stability. We have maintained a positive free cash position. What does that mean? At the end of the day, when we paid all of our bills, we had some money left over. From positions that were not filled, or positions that didn't get filled at a particular time, or we had basically brought in additional revenues during the fiscal year. We're trying to once again solve some of that money away in our stabilization fund. About a decade ago, we had about $1,600,000 in that account, and we've been trying to put it back each year. Last year, we put it in $100,000. This year, we've budgeted $150,000. We try to use new technology and student interns to help us get the best bang for our buck in terms of operations. And we've also upgraded our financial management information system. So we've increased our reserves. My goal is to put the money back into the rainy day fund over time. It didn't all come out at one time. It's got to go back in some orderly fashion. On the capital side, we need this equipment in our ambulance service to the town. It's absolutely horrendous. Come down to the EMS and drive around in the oldest vehicle. Tell me what you see. We need to get on a program, which we started last year, to replace the equipment in the police department, including new cruisers and one command vehicle, and to stay on a program where we're replacing some of our aged cruisers and equipment. We need to replace some of the infrastructure in terms of our pump stations and some of the equipment that would go with that in the enterprise fund. And we need to make, I think, the hallmark of our town hall, a place that you could visit, that's clean, and it's effective in terms of how we operate, and people would actually use it as a show place, as some other town halls are in the region. The dollar bill always works because we all have it in our wallets. Where's the money come from? 23% of the state aid from the state. 54% comes from the tax levy. We're at the levy limit. We can't go any further to make any more revenue coming at the local level. 10% comes from the enterprise fund, water treatment facility. 8% comes from local receipts, the departments that I mentioned, and 4% comes from other financing sources. Where's the money go to? And 1% comes through the federal revenue programs that make up the budget of this time. Where's it go to? 8% to public safety. Proud to say that we put 6 additional probationary officers on board to build up our police department to where it should be. 5% goes to cherry sheet debt offset. 46% of your dollar goes to education, and it should. $4% goes to the vocational school. 10% goes to the enterprise fund that is now in balance. 11% goes to employee benefits. Make no mistake about it, because it was on the presentation that Dr. Rabinowitz put forward. We pay up front all of the benefits for all of the employees in town. Then at the end of the day, we figure out what the charge back to the town will be. And that amounts to be, off of the balance sheet, about $8 million when you figure it out. 3% go to municipal maintenance. 4% for general government, 1%, 4% for the pension system, which is down this year, 2% for debt service, 2% for the culture and council on aging, 1% for liability insurance and reserves. And please go back on screen, please.
Yes, sir.
But the numbers that won't change on the balance sheet going forward, that haven't been changed since the early 90s, Barry, right? That we're paying up front, are right here. And as new employees fill older slots, if we have that ability to do that, we're picking up at 1.45% of their Medicare costs, additional healthcare costs that build up over time, and it's built into the upfront package. The town funds this money so that all of the employees, teachers, municipal maintenance workers, the people that are out shoveling the streets are covered by this type of program. And I want to thank you for the opportunity, Dr. Sylvia, to present.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this particular time, I'd like to allow the Finance Committee a half an hour, or like I said before, there's no stopwatch, so Chairman Braun, I'll turn it over to you, and you have the floor, and when you want to use the floor, just let me know. And you'll if there's any questions, I'm sure that you will ask for. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you, Dr. Sylvia. Thank you, Dr. Rabinovich. Thank you, Mark Andrews. And I think it's a real sign of the times that we're all three coming together to work together. And as a community, we're in this situation together. And we have to realize that our children are our biggest resources. I think everyone here would confer with that our children are the assets to our community. So we want to continue to work with the school department and try to get the town and the school department to get more realistic numbers for retirements, and looking at maybe when they hire new folks, if they can hire them, if there's a way that they can hire them under a different pay schedule, meaning the benefit schedule. We're exploring all these avenues, but in no way do any of us want to see the quality of the education go down. We want to see it continue to grow. And the former chairman, Mr. Paulson's done a lot of work with the school committee, so I'm going to turn the speaker over to Mr. Paulson at this time.
Thank you, Donna. This is unexpected, so I don't have any scripted questions.
You can do it, Dick.
That took some of my time. I thank you for it. I guess one question I have is looking forward, and again, looking at the results that Barry showed up on the screen as the state's numbers are going up and ours is paralleling it. What occurs to me is the other towns are probably going to be doing the same thing that we're attempting to do. So they're going to be trying to improve as we're trying to improve. And I see and I understand the desirability of trying to intervene, if you will. But I'm wondering how we're going to measure that going out 3 or 4 years, and put it a little differently. If 3 or 4 years from now we've still got that same gap, would somebody say, well, gee, we haven't done the job we're supposed to do? Or alternatively, and positively, if we do narrow the gap, can we reward the people and the school department for narrowing that gap? And so my question really is, how do we go about trying to set a goal out, again, several years, and then see how we measure, or how we measure up to that goal over a period of time, and not wait for 4 years, but to look at how we're doing a year out, 2 years out, 3 years out. So that would really be my observation and question.
Is that a question?
Yes.
It is a question.
You want to address it to anyone particularly, or
No, it's just
General.
it's a general observation and a question.
Dr. Beveridge?
Yes. I don't like to use too many letters, but I'm gonna have to. The whole idea of why we give MCAS tests every year, and the reason why there's a state average is because of NCLB, which is federal law. And federal law says by 214, we need to reach a level of proficiency, and they measure us every year against that standard. So when we do our report cards and we send it home to all of the parents, we have it on our website, it's called the report card, and it shows each of the schools where their improvement needs to be and where they've come in. And then they come before the school board and their improvement plans, they talk about those numbers, they say why they met them or didn't meet them, and what they're going to change. Every year, we try to do things differently and smarter so that the measurement will be when we get to state average or above state average. That's going to be, and that's what I want to see, Dick, within 4 years. I want to see us above the state average.
Dr. Rivera, can I add one? Another way, I'm going to stand up. Another way, and I think Bob can speak to this a little bit more, is that the school committee took a look this year at the existing school improvement plans and the format that was being used. And this year, and definitely going into next year, the format that's going to be used is around SMART goals. So that you're not only putting your goal, but you're also putting your actions behind them, and then also how you're going to measure them by. So each school will be coming in front of us talking about their SMART goals and how they're going to be measured based on the criteria that's set. What was added to the form this year was also benchmarks, so things like attendance. So all of the data from the prior year is added to that format, so then every single year we're taking a look at that. So not only are we looked at from a state level, but we're also looking at it from a community level. And we've asked on a quarterly basis that that the schools do come in, and we've already had a couple presentations already, coming in and giving updates to those goals and where they are at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda. Back to the finance committee.
Dr. Sylvia, I have one other question. And
Sure.
I think it's important that we explain it to the parents out here, and particularly the transit population that Wareham has supports. And you see a high dropout rate in our system, but it really isn't a dropout rate. Now, I'd like you to explain that, Dr. Sylvia.
You want me to explain it?
Anyone.
Okay. Believe it or not, the dropout rate in Wareham has been slowly but surely being lowered. But yes, the transient population is a problem because in many cases we don't even know where they go, and so they're still being carried on our books. And when they don't take a test in Wareham because we don't know where they are, that goes down in the state as a 0. So we're working very, very hard, and I know the administrators are working very, very hard to know where the kids are and where they're going, and to know if they're transferring to another school, what school they're going to.
I didn't know whether,
No, that's not good.
okay. No, I think you've answered it. I mean, yes, we have a number of foster children in the district, but we treat them as our own. You know, other communities do. We do have a fair number. We do have some homeless families because of some of the motels in town. And does it add to the costs? Yes. And at one year when the state was flush, they actually reimbursed us, and with a rather large number for a year. In fact, it allowed us to hire a social worker to help serve that group of people better. Unfortunately, that money has disappeared, but the need is still there for the services.
And I think there's anyone in this room will tell you, anyone, observer or parent or anyone else or anyone up here, if the state would only fund their mandates, we would be in the problem we're in right now. And I know that that's said over and over and over again, but at some point in time, the state was paying for special needs transportation, they cut that out. They were paying for a certain percentage of out-of-district placements, and they've slowly but surely reduced that amount of money, so, you know, and that all adds up. Donna, back to your side. I think Dick has a question.
You also have a question?
I'd like to ask another question, and looking at the graphs that Barry provided, and I might say that the presentation I thought was very well done, as was the town administrators. It was very helpful. One of the things I'm curious about, you talked, Barry, about the salary, what I call the salary gap, and younger teachers, or say new teachers, but probably younger teachers, are at a different and lower level versus some surrounding towns. And yet, when you go out on the time spectrum, the salaries kind of go up to, so that they're comparable, as you commented. And then Donna mentioned that maybe, or suggested that perhaps we should do something a little bit differently. And what occurs to me, and I realize that this would have to be handled through contracts, but what occurs to me is that perhaps we might consider, and maybe we have considered, doing this a little differently and turning the equation around. Pay the new teachers a lot more than our competition, if you will, and then make sure that at the other end of the spectrum that the salaries, instead of being comparable to the surrounding towns, are materially lower, so that a young teacher would come into town, it's a question, because they could make more here, but they know that they're not going to stick around because they're not going to make as much out 15 years from now, and that what we're then doing is accomplishing what I think Donna was driving at, and that is to get younger blood coming into the system continually, because you're paying more at the outset. In other words, turn that, not turn the graph around, but turn the numbers around, if that's fairly clear. And that's a question as to whether we've considered it. Again, I understand the complexities of the contracts, and probably a lot of teachers waiting outside with a noose, but that aside.
No nooses. Dr. Benovich?
Mr. Paulson, what I can say to you is, I've been in this business for 39 years, and I've been in 2 school systems and 4 different schools, and with maturity, that experience is well worth the money that we pay. Teachers don't come out of Teachers College fully formed and developed. They need a time to be nurtured. They need a time to grow, to become proficient in their craft. We have a program where we use veteran teachers who are mentors with our new teachers, mentees, to help that process happen faster. But the traditional pay scale, which is everywhere in Massachusetts currently, pays people for the number of years they've been in the district and the number of degrees. Teachers must have a master's degree now after 5 years to have their license, to retain their license. They have to have the master's degree. So there's another lane that they have to go to because of that. And we have always, as many other districts, have paid more as you have more education. So if you have 2 master's degrees with 15 years of experience, then you make more than somebody that has 1 master's degree. Do I believe through a collaborative process between management and labor, can there be somewhat of a leveling so that it's more predictable? The idea that over 11 years, every year it's going to go up because we have, right now, 50% of our staff is within the first 11 years. Yeah, it would be nice to reach that quicker and be able to tell you that's the number that we need. And to find ways, and you and I have had some of our conversations where we've talked about New York City, and I believe you talked about paying certain teachers over $100,000. because of the scores of their students, because they proved that they produced. So I think it's a complicated thing. I don't think it lends itself to an easy answer. But we respect collective bargaining, and we will continue to work in a collaborative way with our unions.
Jeff? Does the answer Dick's question?
Yes.
Okay.
As the country has grappled with how to achieve better educational results, some actually almost sad, certainly disappointing comments have come out of the mouths of educational management people and others who purport to understand the education profession. I'm specifically referring to the notion that after, and I've heard this multiple times, after a teacher gets professionally certified, they really never get any better. So we just might as well hire people who have never been trained as a teacher, who happen to have great grades from an Ivy League school, and they'll do just fine because, after all, they're really bright college kids. The sad truth, Dick, is that under current management style, if you will, there is too much truth to that, in the sense that a professional teacher gets far too little support, encouragement, supervision, accountability, all of the normal things that you would expect to get if you were a professional employee working for an outstanding organization. The truth is that experience must matter, because if it doesn't, then management has failed. And I would contend that the very things that our superintendent wants to achieve with this budget are going to change the very paradigm that you're talking about, which is, oh, pay everybody a lot of money right up front and then don't care if they leave. I don't know a single successful organization of any kind, much less an educational organization, that is successful doing that. And I personally don't think Wareham wants to be a part of that, and I look forward to the impact of the management changes we're making to make the life of a teacher in this school system a whole lot more interesting, thrilling, and wanting to be a part of it and to be retained. And we should pay them what that's worth. And that means that in 10 years, they will be a much better teacher than they are after 3.
Just if I can build on one thing, Dick, and then I'm gonna give it back to the Finance Committee. There's a paradox at work here, you know, there's like a conflict, because it's a flip side of a record. We have had a lot of retirements, and we have had some layoffs, but we really have tried to replace retirement teachers with younger teachers, only because for the obvious reason, because we can buy them for cheaper. But that plays into a problem in a budget year, and I absolutely agree with you. We should be looking at it in a more global, far-reaching perspective. But right now, taking it as a short-term approach, which is next year's budget, the problem with hiring young teachers under the current structure is that not only do you have a negotiated settlement built into their pay raise, you also have built into their pay raise a step system. And the step system is what drives that cost of salary instruction up, because the younger the staff, the more steps you have to give them. When I left Wareham High School, there was a very seasoned staff, and most of us were on maximum. Well, people would say, well, we were making a lot of money, but what you could do is you could probably approach the budget process a little bit more finitely, because there were no steps involved. It was only the negotiated settlement. It's very hard to factor in lane adjustments based on educational and degrees and so forth and so on. So that's the short-term problem. Go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, the only thing that I would hope that we all know that there are always, in any industry, we have are weaker. And I would hope that there's a mechanism that our children don't fall through the cracks. And we're getting, that the teachers are measured, which, as I said, you know, I have not personally ever seen that, but it's something that we should have, they should have a standard that they're expected to do.
Much of this budget presentation is dedicated to just that, to increasing and improving teaching and learning. Chuck, yeah, still over there.
Dick, any answer any questions?
This is like a dead horse here, and I'm going to just try to make one point here, and I happen to, Barry brought up a subject that he and I have talked about, and I happen to agree with Jeff on his observation. The point I should have made, and I will now make, is I am unalterably opposed to just paying people 3% a year more, 3% a year more, whatever it is. And everybody here on the FinCom certainly knows that. I'm inclined to pay for excellence. And so what I would suggest is do exactly what I suggested, pay a higher salary for starting teachers, and then to Jeff's issue about experienced teachers, somebody's in the 5th year, 6th year, 7th year, and is really talented, and the step would get them up to, I'll pick a number, $70,000, I'd say, boy, that teacher's so good, $100,000. And so that what you do then is you bring in the young talent, pay them well, and as you go along, you make a judgment as to how good somebody is. And if somebody isn't so good, they get to the step, but they get to that lower step, and they leave. And that's unfortunate because you may lose some good people, but I'd rather gravitate towards and take the chance of getting some really good people and paying for it. That's really my interest.
Anybody else?
We've got one more question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think I heard you say, Dr. Sylvia, that we have a significant number of unfunded mandates in the state. I want to
Well,
ask
they
you,
used to be funded, they're not funded any longer.
to what extent do we have an ongoing pushback from this community that tells the people in Boston, we don't need all of these mandates without your money. Keep your mandates and your money. Because otherwise, we are at the bottom of the funnel, and we all know what happens at the bottom of the funnel. We never push back to the extent that we get pushed down.
The problem across the country, as you all know, I read an article in the paper this morning about it, is everything's getting pushed down to the local level. And they're just kicking the ball down the road, and it's ending up right here. And it's ending up with this situation that we've got before us, where we've got community needs and mandates that we have to meet with resources that keep shrinking. And you're absolutely right. The answer is in Boston and in Washington. And I wish I had more power, but I will say this, that a lot of the professional organizations are working on this.
Are we? Do we have a lobbyist in Boston, or do we have somebody who routinely goes up there and tells the Department of Education?
Massachusetts Association of School Committees is very active in Boston. They have an entire arm of that organization that is dedicated to legislature. The Superintendent's Association. So yeah, I would say yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have one, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but coming from a business side, you're asking for an 8% increase. Now, I don't care if it's an 8% increase in payroll, 8% increase in expenditures, capital, or whatever. As a businessman, for that kind of request, the first comment I always had was, what am I going to get? Am I in fact going to see MCAS improvements next year? And is in fact a portion, is there some goal in mind? Or are you going to be back again next year asking for another 8% because scores fell again?
Well, the 8% is not predicated solely on scores. The 8% is predicated on strategies and programs that we'll put in place to make the schools better.
But it
So-
also includes interventionalists,
Yes.
right? It includes taking responsibility away from teachers, saying that if you can't perform an interventionist, we'll take over for you.
Well, that's not exactly what that means.
It's darn close to it, let's be honest about it. It says that your classroom situation is such, you need help. If we're going to put the help in, what are we in fact going to hear next year
Well, at some point.
as far as a measurement of
Right.
I can just
Both-
speak,
Both the school
I can just speak for
teachers
myself and the goals
and
of
the committee.
I can just speak for myself and the goals of the school committee, because it's one of our goals. One of our goals, and this is the underlying goal, or the overarching goal, is to to shrink the achievement gap.
By how much?
Well, it's gotta be a finite goal, and, right now, I would say that if you can substantially, work on a long-term approach to shrinking that goal completely, because ultimately, that's the ultimate goal, but, pardon?
We have a state goal to shrink it by 15%.
15%. So, whether we make it or not, a goal is a goal, but that is
That's a
ultimately.
state goal.
Right.
What's our goal? Do we have a goal, or do we just
15%.
have a philosophy? There's a big difference.
Right.
So you're
Long-term-
saying you only intend to do the state minimum improvement,
Well,
15%.
1 year, you said a 1 year goal.
Right, but you said the state is
Right.
15%.
Ultimately, the goal is to reduce the achievement gap completely.
Yes, I agree with that, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, I have an educational degree. I come from an educational background as well.
No,
All right? And so I'm not against any of
I
this.
completely
Right,
understand.
but
your
as
point.
I also said, when you're gonna put up that kind of money, you want commitment,
I couldn't agree more.
all right? And somebody else's marker, the state's marker, in my mind, is not adequate.
Right.
I want to hear it from our school committee and our school administration, that we've set a target, we're gonna tell our teachers what we want. If we get our interventionists, they'll know what we want, and everybody better produce. Because we can't go back and ask for another 8% next year. You can't justify it. Because our tax levy at 2.5 is maxed.
I understand.
All right, you're asking for increases when we have a large number of citizens who have not gotten Social Security increases in 2 years. We have, our average per capita is 22,000, the state average per capita is 26,000. No wonder they spend more over the minimum than we do. They have more to spend, all right? On the Finance Committee, we're facing a very tough reality here. We don't want to deny any child any opportunity. We don't. But we also don't want to have public safety become an issue. We don't want the continuation of the problems that we've had with municipal maintenance as far as trying to keep up with the road work in the town, et cetera. We know that there's a substantial number of capital items coming through, including 2 new schools that you're talking about. And whatever money that we might be able to get this year to feed to the budget won't be available if we have to go out to get new schools. We have to face reality.
And you have to face it long-term, you're absolutely right.
And the best way to do it is to set goals.
Jeff?
Let me agree 100% with what you said, Frank.
Yeah.
There is no way that I, as chair of the budget subcommittee, can envision anything close to an 8% increase next year if we're fortunate enough to get our request this year, number one. Number two, I agree completely that this budget is an investment. And if you're going to make an investment, even in education, you should expect a return. And I will not be satisfied if I don't see a significant change in that curve so that it is clearly starting to go towards the state average. Now, is state average a fairly arbitrary number? Yes, and in fact, it's a floating number. And would I really like to be judged on the number of successful adults this school system produces? Yes, although that's pretty hard to track. But ultimately, I agree. There has to be a return on investment. We have to be able to demonstrate that, and there is no way we can ask for 8% next year.
Okay, we're going on to the other side. Is Chairman?
Steve.
Oh, Vice Chairman Cruz? Okay, you stepping in, Walter?
Yeah, I'm having trouble turning,
You
but.
got it.
Yeah, I think this is a good showing, us all coming here together. It shows that we're trying to work together, and we will work together. We're here because of our education that we got. So are we going to shortchange our children? We need to step up, and we need to get together as a team and do what's right for our children. That's all I have to say. Town Administrator?
I bet they can hear me. I have a mother's voice, so. a couple of things that I wanted to ask. First of all, I noticed that we've changed the language. For years, we've been talking about just being above the minimum net. And now we've changed the language to we're not hitting state average. And I just want people to be aware. I have 3 children in our school system. I have one at Upper Cape, so I'm a public school, pro-public schools. But I think we need to be aware that Wareham ranks 43rd from the bottom in the socioeconomic median income of the state. So when we're talking and we're saying that 266 communities spend above us, well, there are 308 communities that are wealthier than us. So we're actually stepping up more than many communities, for the ratio that we do. And I know that we were talking about the foundation formula, and that the foundation formula hasn't been updated in 10 or 15 years. And I think Mr. White from the FinCom touched on this, that if it hasn't been updated in 10 or 15 years, where are the lobbyists? Where are the arguments to DESE to change that formula? I haven't seen it, and I've heard about that. I've heard that complaint for years now.
Can I just give you a brief answer on that one?
Absolutely.
The Massachusetts School Committee Association has that as a resolution almost yearly, Brenda. No.
Okay, all right. And that's the thing, is that I think that there has to be something, as we're talking about how everything, you're absolutely right, Dr. Sylvia, everything keeps falling down to the local level. But when there are things, I know that like on the town side, we had an issue, and believe me, I know it's not the same, but if you remember, 4 years ago, the town approved liquor licenses. It failed. We had to bring it back to town meeting because it never went through. We were persistent. We got our state rep involved. We got our state senator involved. We had our town administrator up there hustling at the State House, and we got it through. And so that I just think that there has to be more done on that side, instead of just saying, well, the formula's not right, so we're just going to throw the burden again on the taxpayers. And I also think that as far as, I know that this has been brought up before, as far as when we're talking about the equity or the equality in students. And theoretically, it would be wonderful to have the money to afford the opportunities to Wareham students that, say, Lexington or Concord can afford on their students. And that I know has been discussions as far as